Welcome back, everyone. This is our 8th and final session together in our workshop series supporting neurodivergent thinkers from Western Washington University. Thanks again for joining us and participating in this workshop series. In this session, we're going to be chatting a little bit about emotion and talking about a few different areas, including emotion regulation and some things that might affect emotion regulation, including rejection sensitivity, alexithymia, and also exploring how sensory needs and being aware of those can aid in emotion regulation. So appreciate y'all joining. Always, always, always in this workshop series. And I think I've repeated this a lot, but maybe not even enough. I really want us to always go back and remember that the stress of existing in the world as a neurodivergent person due to ableism and systems just not supporting us is going to impact how we feel and our ability to manage those feelings and emotions as they arise. So I think this is a really beautiful example up here on the screen of minority stress and the various levels of stress that folks can face, all the way from a kind of society level to a family level, a family supporter, community level, and how this shows up. How we can kind of internalize minority stress, and it can show up as shame, for example, masking, which we've talked about in this particular series. So there's just a whole bunch of ways that minority stress can really impact folks on an emotional level. So always important to keep in mind. Also important to keep in mind is that there are some additional things related to neurodiversity that could impact, depending on the person, their emotions and how they kind of manage or regulate them. So one example that we've talked about previously is kind of executive functioning challenges. And as part of that executive functioning, we talked about this concept of rigidity and maybe just some difficulties with flexibility or adaptability sometimes. So I actually have a little bit of an example of a situation that highlights some of these emotion regulation factors, I think, pretty well. There was a situation where we wanted to go to a wireless cellular store to get a new piece of equipment for a family member. The problem was we didn't really plan for this ahead of time. It was sort of decided last minute and on a whim. And it was during a moment that was after a long work and school day, respectively. So we get to the wireless store, and the person helping us is perfectly lovely and very nice. But if you've been to one of those places, you know, like there's other people kind of milling around. There's harsh overhead lights happening. It's just not the most calming place in the universe. And then in order to set up accounts, you have to do some things related to tasks and executive functioning, like log into an account with a password that you rarely use. And that can just cause some feelings, some meltdowns, some frustrations. And so actually, two members of my family, including me, we're having a bit of a tough time with all of these different factors kind of coming together. And so we said, okay, we just need to take a break. So we left one family member in the wireless store to try and work everything out. And we went outside and we just took a little break. And we just kind of acknowledged, like, hey, we're feeling frustrated, we're feeling overwhelmed, because there was a lot of these factors at play, including just struggling with adapting to the fact that we were doing this hard thing at a time that was probably not the best time. So that's just, I hope, a helpful example of how executive functioning challenges in terms of doing tasks at particular times, adaptability, and then also sensory overwhelm was a big piece of that puzzle, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. The only other thing to mention in any depth right now, because we're going to cover the ones that are in bold on your screen independently in just a second, is co-occurring disorders. So all this means is that I like to say, ADHD, autism, they like to travel in packs, which basically means that a lot of times there's depression and anxiety that co-occur with neurodivergence. And so those separate diagnoses also come with their own impacts on emotion and how we move through the world. And so that can also affect emotion intensity and regulation depending on the person and what, if any, co-occurring disorders they may be experiencing. So for the rest of our time together, we are going to focus on a couple of concepts that really can affect somebody's emotions and how they recognize and process them. These include rejection sensitivity dysphoria, sometimes called RSD, sometimes just called rejection sensitivity. We're also going to talk about a really interesting concept called alexithymia. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about sensory overwhelm and how that can impact somebody and their emotions, and some strategies for kind of thinking about and considering our own sensory profiles, but also the sensory profile of our person we're supporting, just to help them a little bit differently than we might have before. So first, we're going to start with RSD, or rejection sensitivity. So this is associated with feeling the pain of perceived or actual rejection or criticism very, very deeply. So you could read a lot more about this. I would encourage you to. It's a pretty interesting phenomenon that they've noticed occurs quite frequently in neurodivergent folks. And so what we think is that because we grow up in a neurotypical setting, we do kind of have this sense from very early on that we're different or we're not doing things right. So we may experience some actual rejection. And then moving forward in the world, even if we're not being criticized or rejected, sometimes we can hear it that way, just because we've had that experience over and over again. So this, as you can imagine, can lead to avoiding situations where we can be rejected, rejecting other people before they can reject us. It can also lead to people pleasing, which is a pretty common phenomenon in neurodivergence. So all things to kind of keep in mind. So what we can do as supportive people is A, just recognize that this is a thing, and B, realize that if a loved one reacts to what we feel like was gentle or constructive criticism, they just may not have heard it that way. And even though your intention wasn't to cause them harm or sadness or hurt, that could have been the impact. So you can do a couple of things. Just kind of recognize this as a thing and maybe rephrase how you provide that feedback in different ways, or just provide emotional support to folks where, maybe you witnessed like a friend say something to them and that you didn't think was a big deal. And like, why are you overreacting? Recognize like the person isn't overreacting, like they're reacting in a way that kind of fits their profile, and giving them emotional support around that and validation can be really important. So yeah, you can see some things on the screen too, also associated with RSD. It is an onion within the onion of neurodivergence. So as it relates to emotion, though, hopefully this was helpful in realizing if I get this big emotional reaction, or if my person I'm supporting has a big emotional reaction to perceived rejection, like this is why. This is what could account for that. So being able to emotionally support them in those instances. All right, so this is a really interesting phenomenon as well. It's called alexithymia, so you can read the definition up there. In a nutshell, it's basically a newer concept, newer in that it was coined in the 1970s, but more and more recently, it's been super tied to neurodivergent experiences, and it's around difficulty identifying and describing your own emotions, is kind of the major hallmark of it. So there's a few other things associated with alexithymia you can read about there. One I'll highlight is an externally oriented cognitive style, which prioritizes superficial information over internal emotional processes. So this might mean if you're a therapist, let's say, and you're asking a client the classic question, well, how did that make you feel? That might be a really difficult question for somebody with alexithymia to answer. Now, what they might do instead is they might describe like a story and like share like something that happened that's important to them, and maybe, you know, we could think had an emotional impact. But the emotion isn't the thing that the person is most connected with. It's really just kind of what happened is more important for them to share with you. It can also mean a difficulty in differentiating between one's emotions and the bodily sensations associated with them. So this is tricky because it can kind of work in different ways for different people. So for example, if somebody experiences like a feeling of tightness in their chest, they may have like learned over time or just understand that feeling as, oh, that means I'm feeling a little anxious about this test I'm taking in an hour. Like I know that this feeling is what it is. For somebody with alexithymia, though, they may just kind of not notice that feeling of tightness in their chest and not realize that they're experiencing some test anxiety. And then when they show up to the actual test, maybe it just becomes really apparent, or they just like feel really drained afterward and don't know why. This can also work though in somebody has that feeling in their chest and they feel it so intensely that they think something medical is going on, for example. So kind of difficulties with reading those body cues and understanding if and how those are connected to emotions is just harder for somebody with alexithymia. So something to keep in mind as you support folks, and realize if you ask them a simple question like, how are you doing today? Or how are you feeling? It might take them a minute. They might have to like pause and really think about that, because it's just a little bit harder process to like naturally check in with how I'm feeling, and understanding what that even means can be hard sometimes. Okay, so this is tied to a concept. And again, you could do a ton of reading about. I suggest that you do. I think it's really fascinating. It's the concept of interoception. And it's kind of described as the eighth sense. We have kind of our five senses we know a lot about. Don't ask me what 6 and 7 are. I don't know. But interoception is very important when we think about neurodivergence, because they're kind of linked. And it's kind of what I described before in terms of the feeling piece, like not necessarily being able to read body cues. I mentioned in the last session on executive functioning and focus that when somebody's hyper-focused, they might forget to eat. And I said that, you know, sometimes people with neurodivergence also report that I don't like get hunger cues, or I get hunger cues all of a sudden so strong that like if I don't eat right now, like I'm going to lose it. So again, it can kind of look a little bit differently depending on the person, but those kind of quirks, if you will, in interoception can sometimes affect your emotions and emotional processing as well. And then, you know, having trouble with interoception can make emotion self-regulation a challenge, because it's just harder to kind of check in with what's going on around you, process that, and kind of consider how it makes you feel because of alexithymia. And one thing that they do know, though, can help with all of this is attending to sensory needs. So again, huge area in neurodivergence, lots of great resources. But what a lot of people recommend is working really individually with somebody who is neurodivergent to determine their sensory diet. Don't love that terminology, but that's kind of what we're going with in the field. So a sensory diet basically is somebody identifying what soothes them on a sensory level. Like maybe it's a squishmallow that's like real soft and you can squish. Maybe it's very soft lighting. So those types of things could be soothing to somebody, but then there's also like sensory triggers or sensory disruptors, for lack of a better term. So certain things that really are not pleasant for somebody and can lead to just some feelings of irritation, or anger even. Those harsh overhead lights at the wireless store, great example, like just can't do it with everything else that's going on. So sometimes being able to attend to and support people around identifying their sensory needs it can be incredibly important and helpful. As a supporter, that's something you can definitely discuss and just be in tune with and aware of for the person you're supporting. So if you've got a young person, for example, moving to college for the first time, they have their new dorm, they have their new important apartment, just talking to them a little bit about like what could we do to create a sensory environment that is going to be soothing and feel safe for you, because that can really help with emotion regulation. It's just that ability to have that really soothing, safe space. So that's a little bit about sensory needs. I could talk about that forever, but I want to give you all some time to reflect. So again, reflect on these in the way that you learn best. How has emotion regulation or intensity of emotion impacted my relationship with my loved one, the person I'm supporting, with myself? We can open that up there. And then what role has rejection sensitivity, alexithymia, and or sensory needs played in connecting with or achieving emotional reciprocity with my loved one? And then how overall, I know I went over a bunch of maybe new and kind of complicated concepts today that are sometimes contradictory, but hopefully there was something in those concepts that you kind of had an aha moment. And it's like, oh, I noticed that in the person I'm supporting. I'm going to do this differently in order to better relate to my loved one or to support their emotional needs. So take a minute to reflect on that, and then we will wrap up. So our final summary in our time together. So hopefully you've learned today that as a supportive person or as a loved one, we can provide support related to executive function and combat feelings of shame, anxiety, and overwhelm by understanding and normalizing struggles and strengths. So that's a nice little summary from our last session. From today, we talked about a lot with emotions, didn't we? But hopefully knowledge that we shared around emotion regulation, alexithymia, RSD can help you better understand your loved one, to better understand your relationship. And then we can all consider how sensory needs and self-soothing can help us thrive. So that's something I also don't want to fail to mention, is that I think sensory strategies can be really helpful for anybody, regardless of whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical. I think being aware that some things in our environment are really helpful and lovely for us, and some things we're just like, no, thank you, can really just help us to feel calmer and happier. So hopefully you've gained some knowledge, but also some things to take away for yourself from this experience. And again, thank you so much for taking the time. And for the final time in this series, be well, WW, and take good care.